Brookfield's mega bid for Origin Energy is in doubt, even after upping its bid by more than $1 billion. The Federal Treasurer says much more government money is needed to green the economy, and why people wave at the end of a Zoom meeting. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It's Friday, the 3rd of November 2023. I'm Adam Lang, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Adam. Are you a waver at the end of a Zoom meeting?
Oh, yes, Sean, I do that,
Hey,
and
I
I
do
feel
too.
very silly now.
It does, but no, I'm with you.
Immediately after the show, stay listening for Sean's chat with David Tudhope, founder of Macquarie Technology Group and this year's joint winner of the PSC Medal for Lifetime Contributions to Australia's information and communication technology industry.
A lovely fella, David, who with his brother Aidan started Macquarie, what was known as Macquarie Telecom, now Macquarie Technology Group. They won, as you mentioned, the PSC Medal for Lifetime Contribution. Incredible story, Macquarie Telecom / Technology Group. Basically, what they did is try and improve customer service against some of the big telecommunication companies, initially telcos like Telstra, but then they went on to take the data center operators, and they're involved in a lot of cybersecurity stuff as well. So it's about their story. Incredibly insightful, humble individual, and great insights into the Australian tech sector. So well worth a listen.
Yeah, Sean, I think we all get that customer service is paramount, but the way that this story came about is so interesting, and the innovations, the technology, the evolutions they had to do as a company. It's a great interview.
Yes, David is a very impressive individual.
So, Sean, the main story this morning, Brookfield and EIG Partners have upped the bid for Origin Energy to $9.53 a share, pushing the total value close to $20 billion and declaring the bid final.
And what did the share price do? It fell 2% immediately to around $8.89 before finishing the day down more than 6% to $8.49. So why would the share price fall when the bidder, which already has the competition regulators okay and the board's okay, up its offer? The answer, because investors aren't sure the offer is enough to convince shareholders to agree to the bid. Major shareholder AusSuper, which owns 13% of Origin, has already knocked it back, saying it isn't enough. It wants more. Now, the offer price of $9.53 is 8% above the previous offer, 70% above where Origin's shares were a year ago. It's also at the upper end of the independent experts' valuation. Shareholders will vote on the deal on November 23.
So, Sean, with nearly 3 weeks to go, will the deal get through?
Well, it looks like being a close call. It's unclear if the bidders will get the 75% of votes that they need. Yesterday, AusSuper said the offer remains substantially below its estimate of Origin's long-term value. AusSuper believes Origin has highly strategic assets to participate and benefit from the energy transition. But other major shareholders have indicated they're likely to accept the offer. Fund manager Alan Gray said it will vote for the deal. So this on-market takeover is going to be a close-run thing. Now, there's an interesting wrinkle in this one. The consortium said if defeated, they'd return with an off-market bid. So that's where the buyers go directly to shareholders asking to buy their stakes. In that instance, maybe they don't have to offer as much as $9.53 a share to get shareholders across the line. Maybe the remaining shareholder, AusSuper, could be left with a stake, but without much bargaining power. So that certainly adds intrigue to it. Anyway, the fact that investors are now trading that stock at $8.49 and there's an offer on the table of $9.53, and we have ACCC recommendation, and we have the board saying go for it, that's highly unusual, but it does suggest that big investors don't think it'll get through.
Sean, it sounds very tactical, and this will be a very interesting 3 weeks ahead.
It sure will. And Adam, I'd just like to harp back. Harp is the right word here. Do you remember 3 weeks ago? You do, clearly. On the weekend edition, Michael Thompson and I argue about the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable, the sleeper story, and our favourite story. And I do believe that Michael won the week, I think it was a remarkable story, on the fact that the Origin Energy deal got ACCC imprimato. And you gave him the thing because you thought the deal was such a big deal. And guess what? May not get done. Anyway, I am harping. Let's move on.
As fascinating as that is, Sean, how did local markets perform yesterday?
Pretty well. The S&P ASX 200 closed up nearly 1% to 6,890 points after a strong lead-in from Wall Street. That was on the back of no rate hike in the world's largest economy. More on that shortly. The banks led the way and ANZ led the banks, up 2.2%. Some of the tech stocks did very well, mimicking their Wall Street brethren. REA jumped more than 4%, while WiseTech Global and Xero were up 3.4%. Goodman Group did well, so too CSL, Fortescue Metals Group, Transurban, and particularly James Hardie, which earns much of its income in the US. The gold stocks did poorly, with Northern Star, Newmont, the old Newcrest, and Evolution all selling off. So too the energy companies, with Woodside and Santos both down more than 2% on the back of lower oil prices. Shares in Infratil rose 2% following news that construction at the renewable energy developer's major US solar farm is underway. Battery metals hopeful Sayona Mining has unearthed new lithium hits at its North American lithium operation in Quebec, Canada. Its share price jumped 8%, was the best of the top 200 yesterday. And global asset manager Janus Henderson plans to delist from the ASX. It is also listed on the New York Stock Exchange, Adam. And there's basically just not enough buying and selling of stock in Australia to really make it worthwhile.
And what's happening in international markets?
Well, it's all about the US Federal Reserve meeting yesterday. The world's most powerful central bank left interest rates on hold, but they also left the door open to further rate hikes. It seems to be what central banks are doing at the moment. The Fed said activity expanded at a strong pace in the third quarter and job gains remained strong and inflation is still elevated. As a result, the central bank continues to consider the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time. Now, also, the US Treasury said it planned to sell slightly fewer longer-term bonds next week. So those two bits of information combined to push bond yields lower. That makes equities more attractive. Also, the idea that we're not having more interest rate hikes makes equities more attractive. Hence, the S&P 500 rose more than 1%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq jumped 1.6%. The news from the Fed, alongside expectations that the local Reserve Bank will lift rates next week, helped the Aussie dollar. It jumped about 1 cent higher. It's trading above 64 US cents. And before we leave international markets, now Bitcoin jumped above 35,000 US dollars over the past 24 hours, the highest price since May last year. We were pondering the recent jump in the value of cryptocurrency last week. And as listener Zoe pointed out, we didn't mention a major factor for its rise. Confidence is growing that the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the regulator, will soon approve exchange-traded funds that invest directly in cryptocurrencies after more than a decade of deliberation. That gives cryptos some serious street cred. Investors expect wealth giant BlackRock to launch a fund soon, certainly soon after any announcement. As Zoe pointed out, that's a pretty good reason why Bitcoin's doing so well, and I totally agree with you, Zoe.
Speaking of serious street cred, thank you, listener Zoe.
Absolutely.
We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers has committed to more incentives in next May's budget to ensure Australia reaches net zero emissions in 2050.
But there won't be an attempt to outbid the United States with incentives, which in its recent Inflation Reduction Act put in place hundreds of billions of dollars worth of encouragement to companies. Chalmers yesterday released a consultation paper on the government's detailed sustainable finance strategy to improve financial market transparency and credibility. He said he'd release 6 sector decarbonisation plans for the economy in energy, industry, agriculture, transport, resources and the built environment to map out efficient and transformative paths to net zero. Now, the plan will involve 4 initial priority areas around critical minerals, manufacturing, low-cost energy and greens metals. Chalmers also said the Productivity Commission will up its focus on skills, the gig economy and energy transformation. So, lots of bureaucrats will be interested in the next few weeks to see the details on all this.
And Sean, Foreign Minister Penny Wong yesterday confirmed that 20 Australian citizens escaped Gaza as part of a group of up to 335 evacuees following the reopening of the Rafah crossing to Egypt.
Wong confirmed that about 20 Australians remain in Gaza. The Australians joined American, French, British and Italian passport holders leaving the region. The evacuations came as Israeli airstrikes pounded Gaza's largest refugee camp for a second day, with the Israel Defense Force claiming the death of another key Hamas military commander. Wong, though, yesterday said the way Israel exercises its right to defend themselves matters. She called on Israel to observe the rules of war, adding that there's been a devastating loss of innocent lives. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden said Israel and Hamas militants ought to pause fighting in order to allow time to free hostages being held in the Gaza Strip, but stopped short of supporting a full ceasefire.
And Sean, this one affects everyone interested in residential property. People taking out new home loans rose 0.6% in August, which was better than expected, with investors leading the way.
It's interesting. There's also a near 3% rise in personal fixed-term loans, according to the Bureau of Statistics. Since February this year, the value of new housing loan commitments have trended upwards. That's good news. But really, it's about investor loans. They're very much outpacing owner-occupier loans. Still, the total value of new housing loan commitments remains below the all-time high seen throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Clearly, interest rates have been doing their job, dampening enthusiasm for new loans. And while on that topic, the Financial Review interviewed the Reserve Bank's former top economist, now Westpac chief economist, Lucy Ellis. She said the Reserve Bank may be forced to raise cash rates several times if inflation stays strong.
And Sean, CSR hopes a brighter outlook for its building products business will more than offset a loss-making year for its aluminium division, which owns a quarter stake in the New South Wales Tomago smelter, which has been hit by higher energy bills.
Yeah, it's a tale of two cities? No, tale of two sectors. The building's doing really well, aluminium not so well, mostly because of those energy bills. Chief Executive Julie Coates said there is a solid pipeline of detached housing construction that runs into the middle of next year. She's confident that any further rate rise won't hurt demand because of that pipeline. The company behind Gyprock Plasterboard and PGH Bricks and Pavers yesterday reported a 12% drop in income, even though revenue was up 5%. The building products division actually made a record profit, but it really was offset by the problems in the aluminium division.
Sean, the federal court has stopped Santos from commencing work on its 292-kilometre pipeline to its $5.8 billion Barossa gas project in the Timor Sea, granting an interim injunction sought by Tiwi Islanders.
Justice Natalie Charlesworth granted the application for interim injunction until November 13, when a court session will be held to determine if a full injunction should be imposed on Santos's construction work, according to the Financial Review. The Tiwi Island traditional owners sought an injunction, arguing that work should be paused until Santos assesses new evidence showing the cultural heritage risks posed by the pipeline. The decision comes as Santos has had a ship in Darwin ready to start the pipe laying work, so right at the last minute.
And this is an interesting one, Sean. The corporate watchdog has gained new powers to shut down fraudulent and malicious websites in a move it says will protect more Australians from scams and cybercrime.
Following a 3-week trial last year, the Albanese government has launched a takedown service with the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, according to a report in The Australian. ASIC Deputy Chair Sarah Court said the takedown service removes or limits access to fraudulent and malicious websites. Since July, ASIC has disrupted scam activity, shutting down more than 2,100 investment scam and phishing websites. I think that's extraordinary. It's in the process of closing 400 more. As Court puts it, this equates to removing 20 dodgy websites a day.
Well done.
Yeah, what amazes me, if there's that many out there, they must be working.
Oh, yes.
Like if they didn't work, people wouldn't create all these new websites. So it's worrying.
Sean, moving to international news, the US is set to hold rare nuclear arms controls talks with China amid growing concerns over Beijing's accelerated push to build up its arsenal of atomic weapons.
The objective of the low-level discussions scheduled to begin next week is not to reduce the size of China's arsenal, but to give the Biden administration a better understanding of China's plans, according to a report on Bloomberg. The talks will occur as President Joe Biden prepares to meet China's leader Xi Jinping during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco in less than a fortnight. The sessions also highlight how the US and China are gradually resuming a range of exchanges that had been cut short amid tensions over Taiwan, trade and other matters since Biden and Xi met at a Group of 20 summit in Bali a year ago.
Sean, the Zoom wave, when for some unknown reason you wave at the end of a Zoom, Teams or other virtual meeting, is in decline, but still more than half of us like to wave when signing off.
The funny thing is when I saw this story, I thought, I wouldn't do that. And then I thought, I do it every time. And for what reason? The thing is, if one person waves, they'll often the rest follow suit. So experts in human behaviour and communication have argued the Zoom wave emerged due to our need to recreate the social connections needed when COVID hit. Alternatively, it's a way to signal the meeting is over, or maybe people are just being polite. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, a survey by a professional network Fishbowl found that 55% of workers wave still. It was 57% last year, about 75% did in the peak of COVID. Behaviouralists said motor resonance is a key reason for people waving. When one person does it, others follow, a bit like sheep. Also, studies show that we're more likely to be empathetic and cooperative towards people that we've synchronised movements with. Hence, we all wave together. There you go.
And speaking of waving, Sean, before we do, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with David Tudhope, founder of Macquarie Technology Group.
Yes, he has won a major award with his brother Aidan. They started Macquarie Technology Group, used to be known as Macquarie Telecom. A really interesting individual, knows a lot about the sector, has been a thorn in the side of many large companies. It is well worth listening to this interview.
That's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your favourite podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Adam.
It's Friday, the 3rd of November 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X or Facebook. And we hope you have a great day.